thrill seekers. That was a little bit of a song called Peaches by the Stranglers, walking on the beaches, looking at the peaches. I guess it's about a guy who found a crate of peaches on the beach, which must be an unusual thing to find, and I think that would, explains why he's looking at them. So today is one of those videos where I set myself a task and probably fail at doing it, but let's see how it goes. I'm titling this video, What Buddhism Is to Me. Or something like that. What is Buddhism to me? Maybe that's what I'll title it. Anyway, there are loads of videos on YouTube with the title, What is Buddhism? I checked just before I made this to see it. There's tons of them. And what they do is they're sort of like they're for people who don't have any idea what Buddhism is and they want to know, so they click on a video on YouTube to find out. This is not one of those videos. So if you clicked on this looking for that, this isn't one of those. So I apologize. I assume most people watching my video channel already kind of know what Buddhism is in general. So but in preparing for this video, I looked it up, and it's one of these stupid AI generated things comes up first when you look at anything on Google anymore. I hate them. I just thought I'd give you what they say Buddhism is, and then I'll talk about what I say Buddhism is. So they say, Buddhism is a non-theistic religion that originated in India about 2,500 years ago. It is based on the teachings of the Buddha or Dharma and their core beliefs. I love the first one. Reincarnation, that's the first belief. Buddhists believe that the soul is reborn. The soul, get that, is reborn, and that following the Buddhist teachings can lead to nirvana and enlightened state that ends the cycle of reincarnation. Second belief, karma. Buddhists believe in the law of moral causation, which states that a person's actions have consequences. Ooh, unique concept right there. Impermanence. Buddhists believe that everything in life is constantly changing and nothing is permanent. Suffering. Buddhists believe that suffering is a part of life, but that it can be ended. No self. Buddhists believe that there is no unchanging soul, or essence, and that self is a collection of changing characteristics. Actually, that's a good definition of no self, I think. And then I found this other entry. Buddhists, this is a different source. Buddhists believe that human life is a cycle of suffering and rebirth, but that if one achieves a state of enlightenment, in parentheses nirvana, it is possible to escape this cycle forever. Siddhartha Gautama was the first person to reach this state of enlightenment and is still known today as the Buddha. That's their definition. So there, if you were looking for the short definition video, you got it. I thought I would describe what Buddhism is to me because I'm not even sure what Buddhism is to me. So that's why I said I'm going to set myself this task, and I'm not gonna achieve what I'm intending to do. So let's watch me crash and burn. But what is Buddhism to me? Well, I've told this story dozens of times, and I'm sorry for those of you who've heard it dozens of times. But when I first encountered Buddhism, I wasn't looking for Buddhism. I was looking for Hinduism. I had grown up partly in Africa and been around a lot of Indian people, and I was fascinated by the religion there and what they believed, and I wanted to know more about it. And years later, I was in college, and I'm looking for a class about Hinduism at Kent State University. There were no classes about Hinduism at Kent State University, not when I was there. But I did find this class called Zen Buddhism. All I knew about Zen Buddhism was that it was a Japanese form of an Indian religion and that it was somehow related to Hinduism. I think I'd looked it up in the World Book Encyclopedia or something like that. So I thought, okay, close enough. And I took that class, and the first day of that class, the teacher there read a sutra called the Heart Sutra, which has a line in it, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. And that was it. That was the moment when I'm like, okay, this is what I want to find out about. I want to find out about this form is emptiness, emptiness is form thing. So maybe this is a way to get into what Buddhism is to me. Because I wasn't looking to be converted to Buddhism. I didn't have a specific interest in Buddhism before I took that class. I still kind of wonder how much interest I actually have in Buddhism, because, okay, I've been getting, one of the reasons I'm making this video is I've been getting a lot of comments. There's some guy on there, I think it's one guy or two guys who keep commenting, and I think their goal is to try to attract, that they're hoping that people watching my videos will read their comments and then follow them over to their thing, which I think is kind of a creepy thing to do. So guys, it's a creepy thing to do. I would never do that. I've never done that in my life. And it's a kind of a desperate thing to do. So, it's kind of pathetic. But that being said, one of their problems with me is that I don't teach real Buddhism, because real Buddhism is, whatever they say real Buddhism is. I don't care that much about what real Buddhism is. My teacher, Nishijima Roshi, had a definite idea about what real Buddhism was, and I said in my previous video that, among other things, he didn't think Tibetan Buddhism was Buddhism. Now, I'm going to explain that because I think a lot of people are getting the wrong idea. They're imagining this man standing on a podium and ranting, "Tibetan Buddhism is not Buddhism," and then doing a lecture on that. No, he never did that. It was the same as his approach to politics. He wouldn't talk about politics unless somebody specifically asked him his opinion on politics. And occasionally, people would come to his lectures and start asking him questions about Tibetan Buddhism because they'd known about Tibetan Buddhism. And he would say something about reincarnation not being a Buddhist belief because that's the way he liked to frame it. And they would say, well, what about the Dalai Lama? He's the reincarnation of, I forget who the Dalai Lama is, the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara? I'm not sure. Anyway, and he would say, well, I don't think that's Buddhism. Or they would talk about the belief in various gods and deities or rainbow bodies, which people keep bringing up to me lately. And I just looked up rainbow body, and it's a weird concept from Tibetan Buddhism. And he would say things like that were not Buddhism. And sometimes he would even quietly say, I say this very quietly, but I do not think Tibetan Buddhism is Buddhism. That's the way he framed it. He wasn't shouting from the rooftops, because he had a very specific idea of what he would use the word Buddhism to refer to. So what I've found in doing what I do for the last 20 or 30 years, how long has it been? So Hardcore Zen came out in 2003, so 20-some years. For the last 20-some years doing this stuff, I've found that the word Buddhism is used to mean a whole lot of things. Like a whole lot of different things get... when people use that word Buddhism, sometimes you have to have a long conversation with the person to figure out what they mean when they're saying Buddhism. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's one of the reasons I did that previous video where I said Buddhism is a nerd subculture, because I think, among other things, it's a nerd subculture. It's a lot of things. And a lot of these people who are criticizing me for not teaching what they think is the real Buddhism are convinced that the real Buddhism is contained in the Pali Canon Sutras, the original or the earliest complete set of sutras that we know about, that purport to be the words of the Buddha. And that's the real Buddhism, and the Pali Canon said it, and I believe it. That settles it. One of the reasons I don't follow that sort of thing is because I didn't like that sort of thing when I was trying to be a Christian. I as some of you already know, I was trying to be a Christian around the time that I discovered Buddhism. I had a little cross that I wore on my neck, and I was reading the Bible, and I was doing all these things. I was trying to be a Christian. Failing, but I didn't like that whole the Bible said it, I believe it, that settles it kind of thing. So for me, Buddhism was a way to deal with my own crap. I'm trying not to use bad words on YouTube lest I get, downvoted. By the way, just an aside, a good friend of mine who watches my videos all the time says my videos aren't coming up as recommendations anymore. So maybe I'm being shadow banned by YouTube. Thank you, YouTube. Probably because they figured I don't believe all the things I'm supposed to believe. But anyway, so I don't know. Let me know. I don't think there's anything I can do about it. But maybe you're not getting recommended my videos anymore, too. So, yeah, it was something. I liked Buddhism as it was presented to me by the teacher who taught that class about Buddhism because it made sense. And the practice of Zazen in Shikantaza style made sense. Because what I was most concerned with was figuring out who I am and what this world I'm living in is. Like, everybody I knew around me, or so it seemed, kind of just accepted that the world is this and that I am that, and that you hear these explanations in school and things that would tell you it's a planet on in the solar system and very minor planet, and life, you're just an animal who lives here and then you die. Or then there were religious explanations which would say you're a child of God, and your reason for being alive on earth is a kind of test so that you can see whether you're worthy to go to heaven or not, or whether you're going to be cast into the lake of fire, as the Meat Puppets sang about. Maybe I should do that Meat Puppets song too. And I couldn't believe that either. I mean, I tried to believe that, but I couldn't believe that because it didn't make sense. The reason that Shikantaza made sense was because the idea of Shikantaza, the way I understand it, is this seated meditation practice where maybe I can put on a little graphic to show you if I can find one, where you sit in a specific posture that I'm doing, but you can't see me because I'm only showing you my head and shoulders. And you don't do anything. You're not trying to reach a higher state. You're not trying to get enlightened. You're not trying to find mindfulness. You're not trying to find the truth. You're not trying to go into an alpha brainwave state. You're not trying to do anything. And you're just trying to get into the pure act of just sitting. That's what Shikantaza means. And it made sense. It's sort of weird to say that sitting still and staring at a blank wall is the way to discover the truth about who you are and what the world is. But to me, that made sense, because what better way to understand what I am and what the universe I live in is than to just sit quietly and just let it happen in front of me, rather than taking the words. I could try to do it through science, for example, which I really did, and try to understand their explanations of atoms and protons and the Big Bang and the nebula and the whatever, I don't know, all the other things that they describe in the what's the multiverse and the string theory and all that. But this just did my head in, and it also appeared to me to be just more stuff to do with my head. More ideas to put in my head. I mean, they might be very good ideas. I'm not trying to disparage science as a set of good ideas, but it's still just a bunch of ideas. That's not what the world is. The world isn't a bunch of ideas. It isn't a framework. I had a friend at the time who had a little bit of the same inclinations as me, but he was also he was weird. Anyway, one of the things he said to me is, I'm trying to find the right pair of glasses to look at the world through. See, as a person who wears glasses, maybe I can address that. But I was trying, I told him, to take off the glasses, just to see the thing as it really actually is. Actually, it's very difficult for me to see things as they are without the glasses. But, actually, I don't know. Maybe I do see things as they really are without the glasses, but then I can't read. So it's a problem. Anyway, so that's, to me, was Buddhism. I don't really care that much about what the historical Buddha said and did, and trying to figure that out, and trying to, I don't know, look at it in the original language, as that guy who was commenting on this video channel was telling me I should do, or telling me that Stephen Batchelor was defeated utterly because somebody knew the Pali scriptures better than him. I don't know, that kind of stuff. I'm not concerned with that. I do find Dogen's works very compelling, but I look upon Dogen the way my teacher did. He's a kind of a genius. He's a kind of a genius at expressing this, what he understood as Buddhism, in this really interesting way that I think does a lot to kind of cross the barriers between reality and the description of reality. So Dogen, for example, is famously very contradictory. He contradicts himself all the time. So you can't get a straight answer out of Dogen, because he'll tell you one thing and then he'll tell you the thing is the opposite. But he's trying to say that all points of view are ultimately just points of view. And there are better points of view and there are worse points of view, but ultimately a point of view is not going to get you to what reality is. A special set of glasses is not going to get you to what reality is. A set of written teachings isn't going to get you to what reality is. So to me, that's what Buddhism is. The reason I kind of feel almost stuck using this word Buddhism, because I don't really like it. One of the things that was a bit of an eye-opener, and I haven't read this for a while, was this book. I must have read it 10 or 15 years ago. But it was really an eye-opener. And I'm just going to tell you what I remember about it. It's called The British Discovery of Buddhism by Philip C. Arnold, published by Cambridge University Press. And the point of this very short book is how the British came along when they were colonizing India and Hong Kong and some other areas in Asia, and trying to colonize others and failing. And they were looking at the religions of those areas, and they basically kind of created Buddhism. Now, when I say that, I don't mean that they created the practices and philosophy of Buddhism, but they created this category called Buddhism, which didn't, this is an arguable point, but in some senses didn't even exist until they invented it. The various forms of Buddhism that we know and love today were separated geographically, most of them, by a lot of distance and language barriers and such, and often they didn't even know about each other. Of course, Dogen was aware of the early Buddhist sutras, which I believe are called the Agamas in the Mahayana tradition, something somewhat similar to the Pali Canon, and he actually references those early Buddhist scriptures a lot in his writings, which is something a lot of Mahayana Buddhists don't do. But the point is that this overarching category of Buddhism that includes Theravada, so-called Hinayana, which I know is a disparaging term, but the so-called Hinayana sects don't even exist anymore. Theravada doesn't even really fall under that category because it was a later version. But the so-called Hinayana, the Theravada, the Zen tradition, the Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhist tradition. I know all of Tibetan Buddhism isn't Vajrayana, but a lot of it is. Putting all of these things into one basket and saying that it's this one thing called Buddhism wasn't really a thing. The only equivalent word to Buddhism that I know of in Japanese is Bukkyo. And often Bukkyo is translated as Buddhism, but it really means the teachings of Buddha. So it's not quite the same idea as Buddhism, which is this overarching category of a religion that has all these little branches and things. So the previous Buddhists were aware of the branches of Buddhism that they were around, like the Zen people were aware of Pure Land and what's that other one called? Nichiren Buddhism. They don't seem to have been aware. Dogen doesn't seem to have been aware of Vajrayana that I know of, although he was aware of Tiantai or Tendai Buddhism because he studied that, and it's somewhat related. I got myself into a rabbit hole. Anyway, I don't care about that stuff is, I guess, the kind of point. Like, it's not a big interest of mine to study Buddhism the way most people mean when they say study Buddhism, which would mean to get a bunch of books and read all the stuff and memorize all the stuff and know all the stuff off the top of your head and go, this is blah, 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 and just be able to rattle it off. It's not an interest of mine. So I'm kind of stuck. I guess this is where I started off with this rant. I'm kind of stuck with the word Buddhism because I think I have to be honest about where I got what I got. So when I decided to write books, there were different routes I could have gone with writing my first book. And one of the routes I was aware of at the time was the one where you present the sort of spiritual truths kind of as if you made them up. There are a lot of authors, a lot of really famous authors, and I don't want to name names because I don't want people to get mad at me, but there's a lot of authors out there who kind of present spiritual truths as if they made them up, and they get very popular with this, and their audiences love it. But it seems to me a dishonest approach because most of them got their spiritual truths from Buddhism, Hinduism, whatever they got them from. Usually Buddhism and Hinduism are the ones that are up for that kind of approach. But I got this stuff from two teachers of Buddhism, two guys who, well, my first teacher, he said, if somebody held a gun to my head and said, what religion are you? I guess I'd say a Buddhist. But otherwise, I'm not going to say that I'm a Buddhist. Nishijima Roshi, my other teacher, my ordaining teacher, was different in that he was very specific. Buddhism to him was, he agreed with Dogen's definition of Buddhism, and that did exclude a lot of things that people think of as Buddhist. Dogen was not shy about criticizing other Buddhists. This is, a lot of people get mad because I do the same thing sometimes too, but Dogen wasn't shy about it. I think you got to do that sometimes. This is this. And ultimately I appreciated that about Nishijima Roshi because he was honest about what he thought Buddhism was. I think a lot of the people who are out there being like, I'm all embracing and I love everything, they don't really love everything. They really do have a specific idea, but they just don't want to say it. They like to appear, I don't know, nice or something. But my teacher wasn't like that. He just kind of said, this is Buddhism and that stuff over there isn't. I don't like to do that, mainly because I don't like to have arguments with people, and I don't enjoy that. But I do stick with what this thing is, and what it is to me is Dogen's approach, and that's what I think is Buddhism. And that doesn't mean I want to go burn down your temple if you don't believe in that or anything. I don't care. You do whatever you want. There's all kinds of people believing all kinds of stupid things. So if you want to believe something weird or whatever, or you want to believe something that's sensible that I don't understand, it's fine with me. I don't care. But there is a kind of, there's this thing that I call Buddhism, and sometimes I wish I didn't have to call it Buddhism because I think you just run into trouble with people who have set ideas about Buddhism. Okay, there, I just spent 22 minutes not explaining anything. I hope you didn't feel like it was a complete waste of time. So I appreciate your support. If you want to continue supporting me making videos that are confusing and waste your time, you can go to the URL that you're seeing on the screen below, or if you're listening on Podbean, on the podcast, which I'm putting these up on podcasts, I'm going to tell you what the URL is. It is hardcorezen.info/donate. That is hardcorezen.info/donate. And there you will find links to my PayPal and Patreon accounts. Those are my main and usually my only ways of making a living. So I appreciate your support. But as always, you don't got to support me if you don't want to support me. All right, sorry for wasting your time. We'll see you again. Have a good time all the time. Bye. Hey, Ziggy. What you doing? Ziggy is convinced that his buddy Rob is outside, and he keeps running to the door and barking at it and trying to convince me that Rob is outside, but Rob is not outside, so I keep trying to show him that he's not. But he did see a cat, didn't you? You saw a cat, right? You saw a cat, didn't you? We did. We saw one out there in the front yard. All right, Ziggy. We'll talk to you later. Bye.